Hello. So for my unit plan, I chose to share the This I Believe unit that my students and I just completed. This unit is based off of National Public Radio, or NPR. They have a project called This I Believe, where they have invited people from all over the world, all different ages, to submit a 500-word or less essay about a value that they have and how it has shaped their life, or something else that they believe about themselves or they believe about the world. So we read and listened via podcast to several NPR kind of example essays so that students could gain an understanding of the genre. And then we spent a couple of weeks brainstorming topics for their own This I Believe essays, and so they got a chance to participate in several discussions with their peers to help build kind of the story that they wanted to share. And then their ultimate kind of assessment was a This I Believe essay that they produced themselves. They also took a quiz at the very end of our unit that tested their comprehension of can you read and understand a personal narrative? So that's kind of an overview of the unit as a whole. And now I'm going to show a couple of specific assignments that my students completed and give some more detail about those. So this was the very first activity that my students completed as part of this unit. It is a values activity sheet. So as you can see, there are a bunch of different values that students had to define. So they were given a computer. We practiced going on dictionary.com and finding a definition for each of these words. They wrote down the definition that made the most sense to them, and then they had to come up with a person or a character who reminded them of that value. So some of these were quite easy for them. So honesty, for example, most students kind of had their own definition of what honesty means. They were able to come up with a person from their life that they think is honest. But integrity, the one right below it, is actually an example of a word that most students didn't know, and so they got to practice kind of their researching skills. They practiced some creative thinking in associating a person or perhaps a character from a book they had read or a movie they had seen with that value. So this was our very first activity, just to get them thinking about some different examples of values and what kind of is more or less important to them in their own life. The second activity that I'm going to showcase is our preparation for our discussion that we had. So students spent an entire day filling out this worksheet. There's 6 boxes that all kind of prompt them to come up with a different memory. So for instance, when did you learn it's better to tell the truth? Students were instructed to, brainstorm and think back about times when they were perhaps dishonest, and to kind of describe the story of what happened and then what they learned from it. So again, they spent a day on this, kind of just coming up with their own memories, and then the next day we did a inner circle, outer circle discussion. So they chose the 2 boxes that they had the easiest time responding to, or the 2 boxes that they were kind of the most excited to talk about. And then they went inside of our discussion circle when that question was called, and they shared their experience, and then they also listened to the experiences of their classmates. So I'm going to move on to the back side of this worksheet now. This is kind of a resource for my students during our class discussion. So before they went inside the circle, they practiced how they were going to share their story with a partner. And they also practiced asking these great academic questions. So there's kind of certain sentence stems to help them keep their partner talking, to get more details, to clarify, and really understand what the other person has said. And then there's also sentence stems for like how to respond to those questions. So they used those same skills, these academic conversation builders, when they were inside of our circle. I don't have a picture of it here, but when students were on the outside of the circle, they were responsible for watching one of their classmates and sort of keeping track of how good of a participant was this person. Were they asking good questions? Were they paying attention to other people's answers? Did they share their own response? Or were they kind of distracted? Were they off task? Did they decline to participate? Things like that, just as a way to keep students engaged in the activity, whether they were on the inside of the circle or the outside of the circle. And this was all done, again, for them to just gain a better understanding of what exactly they should be writing about for their This I Believe essay, and to help them kind of come up with some ideas and some stories that could maybe lead to an idea. This is a graphic organizer that I created to help my students plan their This I Believe essay. So we spent several days filling out this graphic organizer. My students wrote a rough draft, and then they typed up their final draft. And finally, we had a couple of days for revision, peer revision as well as individual revision. So we really went through every step in the writing process for this assignment. I'm very proud of some of the essays that my students completed. I actually have some posters that they made up on the board, kind of a sampling of some of the things they chose to write about. I believe everybody is born equal but not treated equal. I believe in reading. I believe everyone should be themselves. I believe people can accomplish anything. Friendship. I believe life isn't fair. So lots of really cool topics and lots of really cool writing that my students produced. So that is just kind of an overview of my unit. We started by reading those mentor texts from NPR to really make sure that students were grounded in the genre that they were writing in. That is something that we returned to, those mentor texts, kind of time and time again, because I think it really helped my students understand the assignment when they were able to read kind of really clear examples. Students participated in a discussion. There was quite a long brainstorming period for them to kind of gather and develop their ideas. Then we wrote our essay, and we went through every step in the writing process to write that essay. It was all completed in class. There was very little homework assigned. The final piece to the unit that I haven't shown here is they took a test at the very end. So we spent a couple of days kind of walking through a example test, and we did that together as a class. And then they took their final test on the last day of the unit. So they were given a This I Believe essay from NPR. They read the essay by themselves, and then they answered comprehension questions about that story that they had just read, or that essay that they had just read. So that was my unit. I was really proud of the work that my students produced, and I'm definitely excited to kind of tweak this and make it a little bit better and teach it again next year. Thanks.